but I'm thrilled to have Dr. Reed. She helps to provide coordination and oversight of the department's ambitious policy initiatives in the post-secondary area to increase access, affordability, quality, and completion. And she has a strong focus on higher education policy development and outreach. She also supports research to deepen the evidence base to strengthen the nation's colleges and universities, students' experiences, and outcomes. Now, she brings a rich body of experience to this position, including national, state, and campus experiences focused on increasing attainment and equity. In her previous work as a principal at HCM Strategists, she led strategic state policy adoption across the nation, facilitated key national policy conversations, and provided direct campus and trustee engagement to improve student outcomes and the success of low-income and underrepresented students. She has also served as Chief of Staff for the Louisiana Board of Regents and in various campus leadership roles, including Executive Vice President for the University of Louisiana System, Executive Assistant to the President and Interim Vice President of Student Affairs at Southeastern Louisiana University, and as a faculty member at Southern University. She recently chaired the Higher Education Transition Team for Louisiana's new governor, John Bell Edwards, and has served in the administration of 2 prior Louisiana governors in the roles of Deputy Chief of Staff, State Policy Director, and Press Secretary. She holds a doctorate in public policy from Southern University and A&M College, and a master's of public administration, and a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from Louisiana State University. She's been recognized with many awards over the years and has been featured in Daughters of Men, a national publication highlighting successful African-American women and their fathers. Now, she's now going to present some remarks to everyone. Then she and I are going to sit and have a conversation about college affordability, and then we're going to be opening it up to your questions and answers. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Good afternoon. It is certainly an honor to be here, and Sarah, thank you for the introduction and for the amazing work that you are doing. Let me start first of all by saying that not only am I honored to be here, but I want to thank each and every one of you for the incredible work that you are doing. We all have a shared vision, all of us, focused on making sure that opportunity is available to more students in this country, in this state. And we want to make sure that students have barriers removed so that they can be successful. And so whether that barrier is a housing or food insecurity, inadequate preparation academically, financial challenges, I think we have a shared vision of making sure that we're removing those barriers and that we are pushing forward to make sure that opportunity for all is not just a great saying, but it is a reality in this great country. We know that, unfortunately, the narrative needs to be changed. It is unfortunate, but it is a reality for students in this country, too many low-income students in this country, whether their parents have a college education or not, or where they live geographically, determines the likelihood of their college success. That is a reality that is unacceptable and needs to be changed. And so our shared vision, our shared passion, and our shared work can make that happen, and we need to be about that with all urgency. We're very excited to have a president and a secretary of education and an ed team that are committed to this work. And Sarah and I were just talking about the fact that John King will be the commencement speaker here at this campus. And we think that's so special that he asked to be here. And I was just in a wonderful conversation with my colleague, Catherine, talking to students. And we said to the students, you know, your story, your struggles, your challenges are the secretary's challenges. And if you think about a person who says, education saved my life, and now I'm the Secretary of Education, imagine the amazing things that you students will do as a result of your persistence and your hard work. And we think it's important that students see individuals like them, see individuals who have similar stories and are interacting with individuals who have a heart for their stories and understand the challenges that they have. And so we think that's critically important. We also need to make sure in this country that more students finish what they start. We know the reality is that just over half the students, about 60%, will complete a college degree. So we need to make sure that we are about focusing on outcomes and making sure that we're focused on improving outcomes at all of the colleges and universities in this country. We know as we look at closer in terms of gaps, when we look at race, white Americans outnumber black Americans in undergraduate degrees 2 to 1. When we look at income, we know that poorer families are more than 7 times less likely to earn. Children from poorer families are more than 7 times less likely to earn that undergraduate degree than students from affluent families. And so again, we know there are gaps with part-time students, adult students, older students as well. And so we've got a lot of work to do. As many people say, this work in higher education is not for the faint of heart, it's for people who are passionate and committed and hardworking. And we know that this work is important not just for our great country, not just for our democracy. As the president has said, we need to make sure that we're once again first in the world, not just because the pride of our country rests on it, but because our economic vitality and our workforce rest on it, because states rest on it, because communities rest on it, and most importantly, because individual students and families benefit. College degrees, the opportunity to have a credential, a quality credential beyond high school, is life-changing for these students. And so we've got to continue to push to make sure those lives are changing in positive ways across the country. We're very excited that MATC and the promise work is occurring. Met the president today, what a dynamo. And she said, Catherine and I asked her, how did you decide to do this MATC promise? And she said, we heard about Tennessee and we thought, that's a whole state. I don't know if we can do it. But then we heard about one campus that was doing it and we thought, we can do that. And so she said, we've never raised $1 million before, but we said we're going to raise $1 million. We'd like to do 3 cohorts. We want college to be free. We can make a difference, and we're committed, and we're going to make it happen. And that work is happening for students here on this very campus. And so we're excited to see this idea of having opportunities around America's College Promise taking place here and at states across this country, because we do think this issue of affordability is critical. We know that for many students, access is around affordability. That is their reality, and so we want to continue to push forward with that. I also want to mention that we're very proud of the work that has occurred around Pell Grants. Increasing Pell is important. The president's proposal in this budget has summer Pell returning, has a suite of other Pell opportunities that will allow students to hopefully accelerate their time to degree, recognizing that with a Pell bonus, a second chance Pell program for incarcerated individuals who are coming back into our communities so that they too have an opportunity to lift their skills. And so we think all of those things are important. But we do know that the purchasing power of Pell has eroded and that it takes much more than just a robust federal financial aid program to get students through. We need to have strong state investments. We need to make sure that institutions are supporting students in important ways as well. And so all 3 legs of that stool must be steady, must be committed, and must be leaning into making sure that students are successful. You know, when we visited with the students today, I thought about some of the statistics we've seen recently. The National Center on Homeless Education pointed out there's been a 90% increase in the students at the K-12 level who are homeless. And so certainly we should not expect that their homeless challenges, that their housing instabilities, that their financial and food challenges will magically disappear when they arrive at the college and university campuses. We need to make sure that we understand what is happening to the students that are coming to us, what their challenges are, and that we have not just individuals like yourself who are passionate about this work, but that we have systems in place that support students so that they do not have to just self-identify, that they feel comfortable in these environments because we have structures in place that are serving them and serving them well. We just met with a group of students on this campus. They shared heart-wrenching stories of their challenges, stories around food insecurities, housing insecurities, having to work to support family and trying to balance their choices, knowing that the education that they would pursue was critical to their success, but realizing that their commitment to their parents, to the mortgage, to the rent, and to the light bill was an immediate and real situation. And one of the students said to us, "This is not a thing, this is the thing in our lives. It's critical, it's important." And so they were happy to share their stories, and we were honored to receive that information, and we will look forward to bringing that information back to us in Washington. As Sara has said in her New York Times article, which was so important in this conversation, students must be able to escape the realities of poverty so that they can finish their degree, and we agree. That is the real deal. We've got to make sure that these barriers are removed. We have to continue to push forward to ensure that we have strong outcomes, better outcomes for students, all students, that more students have an opportunity to finish what they start, that they feel supported and secure in their college and university experiences, and that the reality becomes the situation becomes a reality for more students in this country, that a credential beyond high school becomes their reality, that opportunity for all becomes a life's mission and a life's reality for more students, so that America can become even greater, and so that our institutions can continue to push students forward, and so that families and individuals in this country can prosper. Thank you.
First of all, we state that I think it's hard for people to get their arms around or their brain around this issue of new normal. We think about college as a traditional place where 18-year-olds, arrive, having been to IKEA, jumping the Suburban with their parents, and they've got all this great stuff, and here they are. But the reality is that our institutions today are places that are receiving single moms, returning veterans, older students who are coming back. And this campus, in fact, has an average age of 30 for its students. And so the new normal is a place where students are coming, and there are many more non-traditional students than traditional. So that means that our delivery models, our support structures, and our programs need to support those students. So that's everything from thinking about how we structure the delivery of our campuses and the delivery of our content, where you can really think about having time and place vary and content be consistently high quality. So just-in-time education, I think, is important for those students. How do we flex that even in this state? We talked about the flex benefit program, and our secretary met with some students, and they said what we love about that program is that it allows us to squeeze the education into our life and not have to put the life around our education, because we have complex lives and real challenges. And so the ability to have flexible educational options, having campuses understand what is the reality of the student that you are educating today, I think is very important. Thinking about how do you best serve that student in everything from the time that you offer academic programs to the time that the bursar's office is open for you to pay, to child care, is that available on campus, given the number of women who are on college campuses and the challenges that they face, those things are important as well. So I think having good information, tailoring programs, being sensitive to students, and being aware of the reality of your students is extremely important.
I would agree. One of the things that we're really focused on, especially, though, is the rising price of college. And really feeling that the way that students talk about it in particular is they're really paying that price. They're not only just putting the money up there, but they're really paying for it, frankly, with their souls. Their families are as well. So what is the administration doing to address the rising price of higher education?
It's a great question. I touched on it in a minute, but let me say a little bit more about that. So we feel very proud of the work that the President has done around Pell. We think that's an important piece of it. Making sure that Pell is increased, having the opportunity to have summer Pell, having the opportunity to index to inflation so that it's growing. Those things are important. But as I stated, the reality is the purchasing power of Pell has eroded greatly. And, you know, as Sara mentioned, I was chairing the education panel for our new governor in Louisiana. Louisiana has the largest disinvestment in higher education in the country. And so when states disinvest, institutions tax students. And the reality is it is a barrier to not just affordability, but completion. And so we've got to make sure that that partnership is strong, that we are at the federal level are doing all that we can, that states are leaning in and continuing to support, that institutional aid is available, and that creative opportunities are being found, whether it's scholarships and other things that are helping along the way. So there's much that's been done. We're excited about the President's budget for 2017, but there's much more that continues to need to be done as well.
And thinking beyond financial aid and thinking about some of these issues that we've been really focused on here, food and housing and security, are you all thinking, what are some of the ways you're thinking that we might be able to begin to address that from a policy vantage point?
There are a number of things. First of all, I think we have to realize that, once again, we need creative, collaborative work, as you all are doing. So from the federal government's perspective, this is an interagency, all-in approach. Secretary King is very interested in this interagency work. He is vice chair of the council that's focused on ending youth homelessness. And we have some folks who are focused on interagency conversations around public benefits. Right? How do we think about TANF work study? How do we think about SNAP? How do we think about the existing federal benefits and how do those come together in a way that is working well for students and allowing them to address their food and housing challenges? So we have a website and we'll get the information out to you around public benefits. We're continuing to do that work. The department has also provided some guidance, also sharing and encouraging data sharing and information because we do need to know, as Sara has pointed out, we need to know how vast and how wide is the challenge. And we need to lift and continue to lift places that are doing a good job. Because to a point, to a person, when we talk about higher education, and we hear from college presidents and campuses that are in and out of the department visiting, and this issue of scale is always a challenge. We hear people saying on and on. We have a pilot program, it's fabulous, it's helping 200 students, but not 2,000, not 20,000, not 2 million. And so while we think it's fabulous that there are pockets of excellence that are occurring, the challenge is how do we scale these good things that students need to make sure that it's not happy circumstance that they met the right person or they're on the right campus, but that there is systemic work that is occurring that's securing their opportunity.
Yeah, I think about the issue of scale, and it really does make me think about the number of agencies that would need to be involved to address some of these things. Partly I'm asking this as a teacher as well, and knowing that until I got to spend more time in Washington, I really frankly didn't know what an interagency task force kind of thing meant. Could you help folks by explaining a little bit about what that would mean for an interagency task force to do this work?
Sure. So it means that representatives from HUD, and I think there's some folks here, from HHS, from the U.S. Department of Ed, would be in a room, be in conversations, talking about the individual benefits and programs that sit in those agencies. That analysis would be potentially everything from what are the benefits that are available, what are the rules to qualify, how do those rules either work in concert or against the other agencies' benefits as well. So when you think about those things, not just in a silo, but you sort of look across agencies to say, who's doing work that could help? What are those benefits, those public benefits? How do you qualify? What are the barriers? And are these things working in concert? Or are there things that are working across purposes? So that's the kind of conversation, the interagency conversations that are occurring that must continue to occur.
And I think that that's very, very exciting. I think a lot of us who've thought about these problems over time have realized that, of course, you wouldn't only want to leverage what the Department of Ed could do, right? That it would be possible. And we'll have a panel of folks next talking about that. So you have a very motivated group in this room. I mean, I have to tell you that you've got a lot of folks here who are ready to do some work. What are the kinds of things that they can do to try to support the efforts that you're describing?
First of all, I think put on your best thinking cap when it comes to what do we need to know. What do you see as the barriers and opportunities? Because you are closest to it. So we just visited with students and administrators and asked that very question, and they raised a couple of very specific things that they thought we needed to be aware of, and federal requirements or federal barriers that they think are federal barriers, they pointed out to us that they wanted us to check on. So I would say, first of all, continue the great work that you're doing. Think about what it would take to scale the work that you're doing. Think about how the federal government, even states, can be partners in that. And let's not be shy about articulating that information and sharing it with the appropriate individuals so that we can try to move this forward. Because while we think your work is amazing and important, we know that we are just touching one drop of all of the people who perhaps need this assistance. And so we've got to do more. We've got to go farther and faster. But we need good information. We need to know what's happening to these students. We need to ask, as we think about it, and I think Sara has pointed this out in some of her writings, as we think about students who are coming to us, what do we know about those students in K-12? Students who are in free and reduced lunch, students who have other challenges. And how do we transport that information to institutions, and how do we use that information to successfully serve students well? So I think information gathering, information sharing is good. Information that is actionable is even better. So we've got to think about those things across all of the continuum of education and from the federal, state, and local level. I love that people are being so creative, working with housing authorities, doing food pantries, all of those things. I think that's so important. This is an even richer opportunity for the town and gown experience to occur towards a really important mission of trying to serve students well. And so kudos to all of you who are not just working on college campuses. We think that's important, but these times are invisible. But we've heard from individuals who are couch surfing. We've heard from students who said, my food is from the food pantry, the local food pantry in the community. So I'm mindful of that, what time and when can I get that food and I don't miss it. And as I mentioned, there was a student who said, this is not a thing, this is the thing. And so when we are in school and we're hungry and we don't know where we're going to stay, it's awfully hard to do our very best. It's awfully hard to focus, to concentrate. And there's a level of anxiety in these students that, as you all know from working with them, that is quite challenging. And so we were honored to speak to students, but we know that these are the realities.
Absolutely. Well, at this point, I want to give these folks a chance to ask you some questions, and I have a feeling that they will ask about actions they can take even more specifically. And we do have a microphone, I believe, roaming around. So we're going to go ahead. These folks have got hands up.
Hi, my name is Wick Sloan from Bunker Hill Community College, and thank you for your eloquent remarks a moment ago. I was ready not to go back to work on Monday, but I'm re-inspired, so thank you. As you know, Sarah's charge to us all for showing up is, so what are we going to do? And from your perspective, I love your perspective on what are we going to do or what could we do about the undiscussed inequities in federal funding of higher education. I mean, as you know, the maximum a student like you just saw at lunch can get is $5,800 from the Department of Education. If you move up the street to the IRS and the Treasury with the untaxed endowments and the tax-deductible donations at places like Williams College and Harvard, the subsidy per student without filling out a FAFSA form is $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. And then we skate over to HHS and NSF, and the feds are giving 60% reimbursement for indirect costs for research. And I keep feeling that our students are just the butt of jokes in Washington, and that there's plenty of money down there, but it just isn't. Our students seem to be at the end of the line, and I just would like your advice of how do we put these inequities on the table, because that's where the money is. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. First of all, the students are not at the end of the line for us. Absolutely not. But I do think it's important. Is it on? Yes. I said the students are certainly not at the end of the line for us. Keeps going on? Doesn't like my answer. That's one way to do it, right? Students are certainly not at the end of the line for us. We are very committed to those students, but I appreciate your comments around the competing federal interests and priorities. So I do think that it's important that, to the extent you're comfortable, you make your voice known. You share what your challenges are, what you see as opportunities for students, for appropriate funding for students on the issues of affordability. As I mentioned, this president has a heart for this issue, but he also understands the economics of this issue, and that's why he's continued to increase Pell, and certainly is calling for summer Pell to come back and for us to have additional suite of Pell programs that we hope will be passed through Congress, and the funding will be allocated for those things. In addition, there's a Pell surplus, and so we are hearing from people who are saying we need to keep the Pell dollars in Pell, and we think that makes a lot of sense as well. But the bottom line is this: we will no longer be the great country that we know we have to continue to be if we are not able to invest heavily in education. That is where it is. And so as we talk with states, and we see, I think, about 30 governors who talked in their State of the Union address around economic development and blue ocean issues. You can't get to the blue ocean if you don't have more education for more individuals. And so this federal commitment, state investment, the institutional work, all of those things have to work together. And so we encourage you to share your information and your thoughts. We will continue to share the information that we're hearing from you as well, and hopefully we'll continue to push it forward.
Hi, my name is Tamar. I am a student at the New School and I study homelessness on my campus. You spoke about the importance of data sharing, and I was wondering what plans does the federal government have to get a sense of how widespread the issue is, further than surveys that individual institutions are holding on their campuses?
I believe you asked, Tamar, about collecting more information on how many students are undergoing food insecurity or housing insecurity on their campuses? Yes.
Okay. So I don't know that we've talked specifically around how to collect additional information. One of my colleagues is here because, as someone may have mentioned to you, I'm 4 weeks on the job. So I want to make sure that we're accurate in everything that we're saying here. But you're right, the information, collecting of the information is important. And so we will certainly, make sure that she comes and shares any information about that data.
While she's coming up, I can say that the National Center for Education Statistics does a survey of undergraduates every 4 years called the NIPSAS, the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Survey. And that survey has a lot of really good information on it, but it doesn't have measures of food and housing insecurity. The Wisconsin Hope Lab made a request, but very, very recently made this request, and unfortunately, and this is through no fault of the federal government at all, our request was just ill-timed in relation to putting it on the 2016 survey, which is the most recent one. However, we've been told that it's really at the table for the 2020 survey, which is terrific, and the only issue is just that it's a little ways off. But Catherine, do you want to
See, Sarah answered the question.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we would hope ideally to have more. I mean, ideally we would at least start to encourage the colleges and universities, for example, to add this data collection to their data collection. I can tell you that one of the things that we're working on at the Hope Lab is to find some funding so that this fall we can repeat the survey that we did that I was showing you data from this morning, which was 10 community colleges around the country. And the Association of Community College Trustees is willing to partner with us to try to get a much larger participation in that. These things are difficult, and of course we really recognize, by the way, that when we do something through a survey, it is going to be underreported. But at least underreporting is better than, frankly, what we have right now, which is nothing.
I would just add to that so that's great from the federal side, but Sarah's right, there's stuff that schools and universities can do on their own, and in some ways that might be superior than doing this big federal data collection, although, I think both are really important. The other thing I would just say, because I'm like the financial aid person, is the FAFSA information. We do get like some sort of data on homelessness as it relates to financial aid information, sort of like a specific definition. And I would be the first to say that this is like certainly an undercount, and it doesn't capture lots of different things, et cetera, like all of those caveats. But with that said, we all love data, right? We want to know what the data is. And I know that there's been a request for us, the department, to make that information on the homeless question from the FAFSA readily available to all of you guys every year, and we are thinking about it. So hopefully,
It's a great honesty. That's great.
All right, thank you.
Andy Howell, there's this mic again. Can you hear me okay? I get the data. We need the data. Institutions need the data. We need it from the state. We need it from the federal. But if we don't connect all of these segregated data sets, I don't know if it's going to be as impactful as we thought. So my question is, I'm wondering if the federal government and maybe even state governments, I'm not sure, are looking at analytics and predictive analytics, and maybe even how can federal agencies support institutions to look at predictive analytics when we start thinking about pathways in particular.
So we do have we do have a good bit of conversation going around predictive analytics. We also have, through our First in the World grants that the president had in his first two budgets, about $100 million in federal dollars for First in the World grants, which are innovation grants focused on addressing underrepresented students and improving outcomes for those students. And those include institutions and collaborations. A couple of those, thinking about Georgia State's University Alliance and others, are trying to scale predictive analytics in more institutions. So to the extent that we can continue to lean in on that and certainly glean good information in terms of research around how predictive analytics is working, I think it's a good opportunity for us to do that. What we love about the Georgia State work is it's a comprehensive bit of work, but the fact of the matter is they've erased their equity gap. They have first generation and underrepresented students, Pell students rather, graduating on par with non-Pell students at a time when they increase the population of Pell students and first generation students enrolling in that institution. So when we see institutions that are using good information, data to make informed decisions, intrusive advising, moving students through to and through college successfully and addressing gaps, it's certainly worthy of us taking a closer look, supporting additional research dollars, and making sure that that information is shared with all. I also will mention, just to another point around the First of the World grants that are occurring, those are open source because those are federal dollars. And so the programs and the models and the instruments that are built will be available to others. One of my favorite that I heard about was a wonderful professor from MIT. And as you all know, MIT can do big and amazing things. But she chose in her First in the World grant to partner with 2 urban community colleges around adaptive learning. And so she's building some models that she thinks will be important real-time information for community college faculty around how students are doing in learning in accounting and other math skills. and that information will be available to continue to support student success. But again, that model that MIT will build with the community college faculty will be open source and available to others. So those are the kinds of things that I think make a lot of sense for us to really, as you said, put the data to work to make sure that we're getting good information, but that the information is actionable and that it results in better outcomes for students. Thank you.
I'm Becca Layton. I'm from the University of Minnesota. I just have a question. This might be my naive perception of everything, but we're talking about all these grants and this aid and emergency aid and all of this, but why aren't we taking a systems approach or a top-down approach to the cost of universities and higher education? It's so unfathomably expensive to attend a university now, and there are the students who get the grants, but there's a completely perfectly middle-class person like me who is not eligible for grants. How am I expected to pay for my graduate degree and come out with $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in debt? Why isn't the cost of college? Like, is it being looked at? Are you even the right person that I should be asking about this?
She wants to know why college costs so much, and particularly, and I actually, yes, I can do this, and I hope you do this. So, you're interested in the high price of college, and you're also asking about the students who, frankly, aren't qualifying for these grants, which are two groups of students. One is a group that I always talk about as being too rich to qualify for aid, and frankly too poor to pay this kind of high price.
Right.
And there's another group also that doesn't get these grants, which is the group that can't do the paperwork for any number of reasons.
Right.
So what are the possibilities of lowering the price of college for them? And I believe that the America's College Promise Initiative would be something that would address this.
Sure. So we are certainly committed to trying to ensure that this opportunity is available, and you are absolutely right. You've got to make it affordable so it's available. That's the bottom line. The President has been promoting the America's College Promise. This campus is working very hard and making college available free for students, and they have some criteria around that. And so we realize that everyone won't get there right away, but I think the conversation is important. And when you have a conversation led by the White House to say, this is a national issue, it's a national call to action to address affordability, to address opportunity, to make sure we're erasing gaps. Those are important conversations. It's not happening far enough or fast enough for us, but you're absolutely right. These issues of affordability are critical. They are not only owned at the federal government, as I continue to say. We want to make sure that we have a real understanding and a real commitment from the states to continue to support affordability, from institutions as well, because we are all better off for it. And so I think it is a shared responsibility and shared partnership. But we've got to continue, as you pointed out, to make sure that we are figuring out, we're thinking hard around how to ensure stronger affordability for the institution, for the students who are trying to matriculate, as well as trying to ensure that we're accelerating time to degree. Because when we talk to the students, they talked about opportunity cost, right? We balance off between the work versus school, and the longer that takes, obviously, the more expensive it becomes. And the later that we get students in, the more complicated their lives have become. And so the more challenging it is to help them to navigate. So all of those issues, I think, are real, and we've got to address them and continue to work in partnership with individuals like you, policy leaders at the state and local level, institution leaders. We want to continue to engage to really talk about how do we ensure that we're not taxing students out, how do we ensure that we are increasing affordability, and what does it take in a shared partnership to make those things happen.
And I was going to add to that. I think the way that you framed the question and the fact that you're asking it, it really drives home the point that the students who are not currently or not really at risk of housing or food insecurity are still struggling with the prices and are really important allies in this discussion. And that the current system, in some ways, pits you against each other. And it leads to a kind of awkward conversation, sometimes even between roommates in college that say, I have bills too, and you're getting a Pell Grant and I'm not, and I just have these loans. Versus a conversation about, we all pay the price here. towards a system that doesn't leave any of us in these situations. I also know from colleagues who are at fairly elite institutions where, one roommate is really struggling. What ends up happening is the students end up kind of subtly trying to take care of each other to meet the needs in a way that doesn't embarrass the other person. This is a situation I really don't think that we want to be in over the long haul, but it is going to require massive change, which therefore means that it's this administration and the next administration, and probably the one after that, frankly, before we make real progress. Then the real point is to not give up.
Hello, I'm Vernon Young from the Braden Park Technical College Board. I'm also a member of the ACCT Board, and the question I have is, what do we do as trustees to deal with the growing mental health issues of our students? Because right now our budgets are shrinking. I mean, there's no more money to play with, but the mental health needs of our students are just growing and growing and growing, including our veterans. How do we deal with that?
Right. Mental health, right? Yes, enormously important question. A couple of observations on that. Again, I think, thank you as a trustee for that. And the trustees are critically important in the work that is occurring in higher education. I think under-tapped, but very talented. So I thank you for your work and your leadership and for that good question. So we have several issues occurring, I think, if we look at mental health. First of all, across the country and in communities, just not enough mental health support and resources to match the need. So that's a real challenge. I can tell you from being on a college campus, we had students who were in need of mental health and did not want to self-identify. And so we had to think about not only are we providing mental health, but where are we providing the mental health so that the big door doesn't say counseling, right? It's something else so that students feel comfortable going. We had parents who would call to say, I'm trying to figure out if my kid is on their meds, can you tell me? And so we had to navigate those kinds of reporting issues with students who are now of age and parents wanting that information. And so there are a full range of issues that we have to address, but you're absolutely right. Until we take on this issue of mental health, realize that we are under-resourced and that this is a real issue. You can't turn on the news any given day without seeing tragedies that often are tied to mental health issues. And so I do think that we have to have a good assessment of what is available on campus, how are students availing themselves of that, what are we doing to make sure that we're connecting dots to ensure that students are getting the help that they need, that they're being referenced to places where we can help them and assist them. But even that is a challenge for us and not enough. So I think that assessing the need is important, assessing the resources is important, articulating the need is important as well, because we've got to, again, get our arms around how big is the challenge, and do we have the resources to match the need? And those are the real, I think, issues that we are continuing to face in higher education. But it's not isolated to higher ed, as you all know. These are community, state issues, and so that doesn't make us feel better, but it does give us a sense of just how broad it can be. Again, I think these partnerships in communities are important. So we've got to figure out not only what do our institutions offer, but what does the surrounding community offer? How do we partner up? And what other resources perhaps that are untapped need to be tapped to support students?
And we were really glad recently the Wisconsin Hope Lab had the opportunity to partner with ACCT and the Healthy Mind Study at the University of Michigan and Single Stop to produce a report called Too Distressed to Learn. And in that, you can find the results of our survey that we did with community college students around mental health services. And we found what we really honestly, having been on a lot of campuses, expected to find, which was a tremendous amount of need and very, very few people getting the services that they need. I think that there's awareness around suicide, and so there's some training that's available to faculty members, for example, who may be among the first to actually know that something's going on with the student, but beyond being aware of suicidal ideation, they're not trained, nor can they honestly in their jobs be expected to be the first responders for things like serious depression, anxiety, and that. But I will tell you, in the back of that report are a long series of recommendations, mostly put together by Dan Eisenberg, who does a lot of work on undergraduate mental health. So I recommend the report to you. It's on our website. Any questions?
Hello, just thank you so much for being here with us today. I was hoping that you could invite us into your world in terms of us being able to better understand what are the counter politics that are showing up to the conversations of you all doing interagency work and talking about the affordability of higher education and our commitment to it. I would love to hear from you in those rooms, in those conversations. What is the pushback? What are the arguments that you get that said, no, we should not make college more affordable. No, we should not support basic need security in higher education, so that it informs the way that we're approaching work in terms of us coming from the UC system and having access to major faculty, research centers, so on and so forth, but also as we're helping folks branch out and create relationships with folks like the Avengers or Hope Lab, as other people call them, and other folks that are in the field that are doing great work. And I say this because sometimes I come to these events and I hear a lot of choir singing, and it's gorgeous. I love me some gospel music. But I also want to leave feeling like I learned something new. And I want to know what are those politics from your world to invite me into that conversation.
Thank you. I will ask Catherine to come up as well because she's in a lot of the conversations if she's comfortable. I will say this. I appreciate the good gospel music as well. And so it's good to be in conversations, but you're right. We do need to know what are the counter arguments. Certainly the counter argument we hear is that students need skin in the game, right? It's not good to have to be free, that we need to make sure that they understand the value, and so the value proposition is tied in some way in some people's minds to actually having paid for it, put some money into it. So we hear those conversations. We also hear conversations around, college is not for everyone. And so you've got to continue to say, yes, if you think about colleges, technical college, community college, and four-year institutions, college is for everyone because everyone needs a credential beyond high school because the knowledge economy has moved and it punishes those individuals that do not have those skills. And so we have to continue to respond to that. Every 5-10 years you see a series of conversations and stories, is college worth it? And so we have those conversations over and over again about, is college worth it? Is college affordable? Who's making college not affordable for students and what's occurring there? So I think those are some of the high-level conversations that we're hearing. Catherine, anything else?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak on the next panel too, so I'm going to sort of save some of my more detailed comments for that. No, but I would say that I feel like this is probably a good time. And by the way, I love this question. This is like such a great question. I wish I could answer this question at every conference because this is true. Like this is what you all really need to understand about the conversations that we have and the sort of debates that we have behind those closed doors. The budget is always looming over everything we talk about. Spending money, having a budget constraint, and figuring out where to, put the pieces of the pie. That is really everything we do. It influences all of the decisions that we make. And, I have to say, since I'm getting asked this question, I'm going to take the opportunity to just say how incredibly proud I am to work for an administration that has put a lot of money into education. When the Obama administration is faced with these choices, they've put money into Pell Grants. We've put money into the student loan program. When we passed healthcare reform, we took $60 billion that was being given to the banks, and we reinvested it in students. And so, those are the sorts of decisions that we make, and at a high level, that's kind of what shows up out here and what you see on the news and the media about the budget decisions and how much money goes into Pell, how much money went to the American Opportunity Tax Credit, et cetera, et cetera. But even on these detailed conversations, the budget is always weighing on that. And if folks want to spend more money, you have to make the case that it's going to have a good return. And I think probably everybody in this room agrees that college has a good return. This is an investment in yourself and in society. But continually being able to make that case, and and this is one of the things I would ask all of you guys to help us with,
in doing your research or as practitioners bringing back the good stories, being able to show that that investment was worthwhile and that, you know, it helped someone, it helped you bring down costs, and it changed someone's life, it put them out there into the world working. That's the kind of stuff that we can take back into the sort of cold calculation of the budget and actually move this work forward.
I'll add one thing to that that these two may or may not be able to say, and to also highlight how different this administration is from some others. I've talked to folks who have been making policy in the past who have said, I don't want to have this conversation with you about food and housing insecurity among undergraduates because this is not a welfare program. This is the Pell Grant, and it's for educational expenses. And if you start talking about these non-educational expenses, you put that Pell Grant at risk. I don't agree with this, but I think it's really important to know that it's a point of view about what will and will not jeopardize a program that is also very important, and the politics, frankly, around serving the quote-unquote poor. I think there's another question right there.
It's nice that we can, Norbert Hill from the Oneida Reservation in Wisconsin, it's nice that we can all celebrate increases in Pell, but at the same time the institutions raise their tuition so they gobble up any net that would go into the pocket of a student. So it's really a non-plus.
Yes, that is a challenge, and that's why we continue to push around the disinvestment issues. So I can tell you personally, previously to this job, working with in Louisiana, as I mentioned, which has had the highest disinvestment in higher ed, the governor talked about trying to make sure that he was framing higher education as an investment, not an expenditure. And so we've got to turn the conversation in states that are disinvesting. It was heartening to see the latest report that shows that institutions or state support is on the uptick over the last 2 years, not where it needs to be, but it is moving. But you're absolutely right. The correlation between state disinvestment and tuition increases by institution is hanging completely together. It has eroded the purchasing power of Pell, and so we're working cross-purpose. No surprise, it says in 50 states, college is not as affordable as it used to be, but what I really like about the report is it's state-specific, and there's an interactive map that's county-specific. So it can show you down to the state, to the local county, projected student need, and how much is tuition, and where's the gap. So how much of a family's income is going to be required to address college affordability by community. So I think that's the kind of granularity of information that allows us to have good conversation. It's challenging and stark when you look at the geography of these issues, where you have communities right next to each other and a vast difference in the affordability of college. So those are things that I think are very important. You're absolutely right. We've got to make sure that we're continuing to push state investment, federal investment, institutional investment. But I do think it would be great for you to take a look at that report and continue to make your voices known. As Catherine said, share the stories. Let us know and let leaders know that are in policy decision-making roles what is happening to institutions and to students, what is a good return on investment, and what are the barriers to their success. Again, framing this as a talent conversation, development of greater talent, because there are individuals who will continue to say, you know, what is this, another welfare program? This is a talent program. This is about America's talent, our promise, our state's support, and our institution and family support. And so we invest on the front end or the back end, but either way we need to invest. And the front end investment is far, far smarter for us to do.
And I really appreciate your discussion about the variation that is happening and, frankly, the inequality that's happening. When I look at these cross-state comparisons and I look at the trends in state disinvestment, I can't help but think we have to look within the states as well. And one of the pieces of work that we've been doing is asking the question, why is it that the institutions that have the students with the greatest numbers of Pell Grant recipients in the state get the least number of dollars from the state to serve their students, which results in the highest prices? So why does it cost, I mean, the most expensive institution in this state to attend for a low-income student is the UW-Milwaukee. That's because UW-Milwaukee is getting so very little money on a per-student basis from the state of Wisconsin. And yet the institution that gets the most amount of money, which I will not name, but I put there, has the smallest number of Pell recipients, right? And so we're doing some things that in K-12 education, we might not fix it, but we would call it out. In higher ed, it's such common practice that we just wave it away. Other questions?
I just get confused all the time. I've been in higher ed for 15 years, and what you were all just talking about, that case has already been proven. You could fill this room with data that shows that education has a return on investment. You can look at the chart of the most and least educated states. I come from one of the most. I think Minnesota's in the top 3. And surprise, surprise, corporations come there all the time specifically for our workforce. So can you explain to me, I mean, I get the fact that the argument has to be made and that what the pushback is, but the data is there, and why does the pushback keep coming?
Well, that is a great question. So I think politics are, alive and well. And we've got to continue to say, we don't think education is a political issue, right? We think that the numbers are very clear. We want to make sure opportunity is for all. But the fact of the matter is we do see continued arguments and concerns about, is there a good return on investment? Is education worth it? Is college for everyone? And so we have the responsibility, those of us who are passionate about it and know it well, to respond and respond accurately. And that's why I think the collection of stories, the data, the research is important, because it allows us to point to it and say, we understand the concern, but here is where the facts are. This is what we know about what is happening for students and what happens to individuals who do not have that opportunity. In terms of looking at incarceration rate, looking at overall benefits of higher education, whether you're least likely to need tax support, public benefit support from your state, that you're more likely to contribute, to be healthy, more likely to be engaged in your communities. All of the benefits of higher education are well documented, but we continue to articulate those, and we have a responsibility to do so. Because as Catherine said, these are competing political interests, competing budget interests, and so we've got to continue to make the case. We've got to continue to talk to leaders who need to be educated and understand these issues, and we just got to keep pushing on it. But yes, there is good information and good data out there that we are continuing to have to respond to it, point to it, and hopefully have additional information to share.
I think the point about competing interests is real. And I think that it's so important to know that we voted to resource a federal student aid program at a time when the students who were in college were overwhelmingly white and male. And that over time, as those demographics changed and more people from a variety of families came to college, all of a sudden the state started to pull back on their support on a per-student basis. And questions started to be raised about who ought to be in college, and what is college, and are people learning enough, and do they work hard enough, and all of this sort of thing. So I think really, truly, we do have to ask whose interests are at stake here, who is concerned about what will happen if we do invest in folks. And, the argument will be made. I have undergraduates who ask me, quite reasonably, frankly, if everybody goes to college, well, am I going to earn more money than other people? They're worried that the premium will disappear, and I say, it's possible it will disappear, but I have to tell you that a rising tide lifts everybody, and that to live in a society in which people are better educated, to live in a state where businesses want to come and be there, to live around other children who have educated parents, this is something that you want. But it is widely disputed, let's put it that way, and I think we're seeing it this is quite a time to be having this conversation in the midst of this presidential campaign. There's so much at stake, so I appreciate your question. I think we have time for one more.
Thanks. Hi. I sense the frustration in the room, and I share it. And back to Sarah's question raised earlier, pointed out by Wick, I think, on so what should we do, or what can we do? Do you have advice for us around advocacy activities and ways that we can participate in the conversation and influence the decisions being made that maybe aren't or look a little bit different from the usual voices at the table? And how can we support that effort?
I think she wants to start. Sarah, you want to take that? So there's strength in numbers. I think that's important. And I think that it's also important to realize who has influence, right? Who do you need to share the story with, and how do you tell the story well? So the ability to put students in front of individuals is important. To the extent students are comfortable sharing their story, those things have made a difference, I think, dramatically. The ability to really articulate well and concisely what you see as the real challenge. And to make sure that your message is not just one of saying, we have a problem, or there are some things you need to be aware of, but what is the ask, right? That's what legislators, congressmen, presidents, people want to know, what's the ask? What can I do? How can I make a difference? So I think being able to think collectively about that, to share good information, and to have a nice, crisp request for what is the ask, I think is very, very important as you continue to do this good work. And I appreciate the frustration, but I also appreciate the commitment that you all have. Can you imagine where we would be without all of you in this room doing the great work that you are doing? And so we can't get weary in the work. We got to be smarter every time about how we do the work that we do, because Sarah's right. Equity and opportunity must be broadened. If this great country could do the GI Bill well, we can certainly continue to improve access and opportunity for more students. We've got to do that, and we've got to be able to articulate that in ways that can make a difference.
I believe that by the end of tomorrow, you will have many asks. And I agree that they will have to be crisp and clear. We put forward a proposal 2 days ago on our website, and I have to tell you, inspired by Wick Sloan, we put forward a proposal for a national school lunch program expanded to higher education. Some folks called and said, you really think that's going to happen? I said, well, it's certainly not going to happen if we don't ask. So it's time to start asking, and we need to ask it of the people who then know what to do, in order to help move it forward. So I agree with that. I would say it's a perfect transition to the next section on federal policy. And then really, when you get to see tomorrow what some of the schools around the country are doing, the question is, what can folks do to help facilitate more of the doing these things? Right now, there are opportunities that federal policy does allow for that we're not seizing, and there are things that, frankly, federal policy is in the way of that we could work to address. So thanks, everybody, for the discussion. I'm going to get ready for the next panel.